Vladimir Putin, a detailed portrait of power. Early life and formative years. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born on October 7, 1952 in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, in the Soviet Union. Growing up in a modest communal apartment, Putin's early life was shaped by the post-World War II Soviet environment. His father, Vladimir Spiridonovich, was a factory worker and a decorated war veteran, while his mother, Maria Ivanovna, worked various jobs to support the family. The gritty, competitive atmosphere of Leningrad's courtyards instilled in young Putin a sense of resilience and toughness. He took up martial arts, particularly judo and sambo, which he credits for teaching him discipline and strategic thinking. Putin's academic journey led him to Leningrad State University, where he studied law and graduated in 1975. His fascination with intelligence work, inspired by Soviet spy novels and films, drove him to join the KGB, the Soviet Union's primary security agency. After completing his training, he served as a foreign intelligence officer for 16 years, including a significant posting in Dresden, East Germany, from 1985 to 1990. There, he monitored political developments and recruited informants, witnessing firsthand the unraveling of Soviet influence as the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was a defining moment for Putin, who later described it as a geopolitical catastrophe that left Russia humiliated and weakened. Rise to power. Returning to Russia in 1990, Putin transitioned from intelligence work to politics. He joined the administration of Anatoly Sobchak, his former law professor and the mayor of St. Petersburg. As head of the Committee for External Relations, Putin managed foreign investments and trade, gaining a reputation as a pragmatic and loyal operator. His role also exposed him to the chaotic, corruption-riddled landscape of post-Soviet Russia, where he allegedly navigated dealings with organized crime, a charge he has consistently denied. In 1996, Putin moved to Moscow, joining President Boris Yeltsin's administration. His ascent was meteoric. He served as deputy chief of the Presidential Property Management Department, then as director of the Federal Security Service, FSB, the KGB's successor from 1998 to 1999. In August 1999, Yeltsin appointed him prime minister, a surprising choice given Putin's relative obscurity. When Yeltsin resigned on December 31, 1999, Putin became acting president. He won the presidential election in March 2000, capitalizing on his image as a strong, decisive leader amid Russia's economic turmoil and the Second Chechen War. Consolidating power the first two terms, 2000-2008. Putin's early presidency focused on restoring stability and centralizing authority. He reasserted Kremlin control over Russia's regions, curtailed the power of oligarchs, and renationalized key industries, particularly in energy. Companies like Gazprom and Rosneft became tools of state influence, with the state controlling an estimated 70% of the economy by some measures. High oil prices during the 2000s fueled economic growth, with real incomes rising significantly and the middle class expanding. Putin's approval ratings soared, often exceeding 70%, as Russians credited him with ending the chaos of the 1990s. However, his methods sparked controversy. Media freedom eroded as the Kremlin took over major television networks and pressured independent outlets. High-profile critics such as journalist Anna Politkovskaya faced harassment or worse. Politkovskaya was assassinated in 2006. The 2003 arrest of oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who had challenged Putin politically, signaled that dissent would not be tolerated. Putin also strengthened the Siloviki, a network of security and military officials who became a dominant force in his administration. On the global stage, Putin sought to restore Russia's influence. He initially cooperated with the West, supporting the US after the 9/11 attacks and allowing American bases in Central Asia. However, tensions grew over NATO's eastward expansion and US missile defense plans. By 2007, Putin's Munich Security Conference speech sharply criticized Western unipolar dominance, signaling a more assertive Russian foreign policy. Prime Minister and return to the presidency, 2008-2012. Barred by the Constitution from a third consecutive term, Putin stepped down as president in 2008, becoming prime minister under President Dmitry Medvedev. Despite the title change, Putin remained Russia's paramount leader, overseeing major decisions. The 2008 Russo-Georgian War, sparked by Georgia's NATO aspirations and conflict in South Ossetia, showcased Russia's willingness to use military force to protect its interests. Russia's swift victory reinforced Putin's image as a defender of national pride. Economic challenges, including the 2008 global financial crisis, dented Putin's popularity, and public protests erupted in 2011-2012 over alleged electoral fraud and his announced return to the presidency. The protests, the largest since the Soviet era, were met with crackdowns, and Putin accused Western powers of orchestrating them. He won the 2012 presidential election, but the unrest highlighted growing domestic discontent. Third and fourth terms: authoritarianism and foreign policy, 2012 present. Returning to the presidency, Putin tightened control. New laws targeted NGOs, labeling those with foreign funding as foreign agents, and restricted online speech. The 2014 annexation of Crimea, following Ukraine's pro-Western Maidan uprising, was a pivotal moment. Putin justified the move as protecting Russian-speaking populations, and it boosted his domestic approval to near-record highs. However, it triggered Western sanctions and isolated Russia diplomatically. The 2022 invasion of Ukraine, described by Putin as a special military operation to denazify and demilitarize the country, marked a dramatic escalation. In speeches, Putin framed the conflict as a defense against Western encirclement, citing NATO expansion and Ukraine's alignment with the West. The invasion, the largest in Europe since World War II, led to thousands of deaths, displaced millions, and drew global condemnation. The International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin in 2023 for alleged war crimes, including the deportation of Ukrainian children. Putin's historical narratives, often referencing medieval Russes and the Soviet era, underscore his belief that Ukraine is inseparable from Russia. In a 2021 essay, he argued that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, a view critics say justifies territorial ambitions. The war has strained Russia's economy, with sanctions targeting its energy exports and financial systems. Yet Putin has maintained domestic support through propaganda and suppression of dissent. Domestic policies and ideology. Putin's domestic agenda emphasizes traditional values, state control, and national pride. Though he has promoted the Russian Orthodox Church as a moral authority, framing Russia as a bulwark against Western liberalism. Laws banning gay propaganda and decriminalizing certain forms of domestic violence reflect his appeal to conservative voters. Critics argue this masks economic stagnation and diverts attention from issues like corruption, which Transparency International ranks as a major problem in Russia. Constitutional amendments in 2020 allowed Putin to potentially remain president until 2036, cementing his grip on power. The death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2024, widely attributed to state involvement, underscored the risks faced by Putin's critics. Over 4,000 people have been prosecuted for anti-war protests since 2022, according to human rights groups. Global influence and alliances. Beyond Ukraine, Putin has expanded Russia's global footprint. In Syria, Russian forces supported Bashar al-Assad's regime, securing military bases and influence in the Middle East. Partnerships with China, India, and African nations have countered Western isolation. The BRICS alliance, which Russia co-founded, reflects Putin's push for a multipolar world order. His 2019 treaty with Mongolia and arms deals with countries like Indonesia highlight efforts to diversify alliances. Personal life and public image. Putin cultivates an image of strength, often seen in staged activities like judo, horseback riding, or shirtless hunting trips. Little is known about his private life. He divorced his wife Lyudmila in 2013 and has 2 daughters, rarely mentioned publicly. Rumors of vast personal wealth, including a Black Sea palace, have circulated, but Putin denies these claims. Former associates like Sergei Kolesnikov allege he controls significant assets through proxies, though evidence remains contested. Legacy and controversies. Putin's legacy is deeply polarizing. To supporters, he is a patriot who restored Russia's strength after the Soviet collapse, modernized its military, and challenged Western hegemony. To critics, he is an authoritarian who dismantled democratic institutions, enriched loyalists, and destabilized the region through aggression. His economic record is mixed. While the 2000s saw growth, recent years have brought stagnation, with sanctions and war exacerbating challenges. The Ukraine conflict has defined Putin's later years, raising questions about his strategic calculations. Some analysts argue he misjudged Western resolve and Ukraine's resistance, while others see the war as a calculated risk to cement his historical legacy. As of 2025, Putin remains a dominant figure, but his long-term impact on Russia and the world is uncertain. The Kremlin, fortress of power and symbol of Russia. Historical foundations. The Kremlin, a fortified complex in the heart of Moscow, stands as one of the most enduring symbols of Russian power. Its origins trace back to the 12th century, when a wooden fortress was built on Borovitsky Hill, overlooking the Moskva River. By the 14th century, under Prince Dmitry Donskoy, the Kremlin's white limestone walls began to take shape, marking Moscow's rise as a political center. The term Kremlin itself, meaning fortress inside a city, reflects its role as a defensive and administrative hub. In 1475, Grand Prince Ivan III, known as Ivan the Great, commissioned Italian architects like Aristotele Fioravanti to rebuild the Kremlin in grander style, reflecting Moscow's claim as the Third Rome after Constantinople's fall. The red brick walls and towers, still iconic today, were completed by the 1490s, encircling cathedrals, palaces, and armories. The Assumption Cathedral, consecrated in 1479, became the coronation site for Russian tsars, while the Annunciation Cathedral served as the private chapel for royalty. The Kremlin's layout, spanning 28 hectares, was designed to project divine and temporal authority, with golden domes glinting over Moscow. The Kremlin under the Tsars. For centuries, the Kremlin was the residence of Russian rulers. Ivan the Terrible, crowned in 1547, expanded its fortifications and oversaw the construction of the Ivan the Great Bell Tower, which stood as Russia's tallest structure for centuries. The Kremlin's armory, established in the 16th century, housed treasures and weapons, symbolizing wealth and military might. During the time of troubles, 1598-1613, the Kremlin was occupied by Polish forces, a humiliation that ended with its recapture by Russian militias, paving the way for the Romanov dynasty. Under Peter the Great and his successors, the Kremlin's political role diminished as the capital moved to St. Petersburg in 1712. Yet it remained a spiritual and ceremonial center. Catherine the Great commissioned the neoclassical Senate Palace in the 1780s, a testament to the Kremlin's adaptability to new architectural trends. The Grand Kremlin Palace, built in the 1840s under Nicholas I, became a lavish residence for the imperial family, with its 700 rooms adorned with chandeliers and gilded frescoes. The Soviet-era transformation. The Kremlin's modern significance was cemented after the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Vladimir Lenin moved the capital back to Moscow in 1918, making the Kremlin the seat of Soviet power. The Bolsheviks secularized the complex, converting churches into offices and museums. The red stars atop the Kremlin's towers, installed in the 1930s, replaced imperial eagles, signaling the shift to communist ideology. Lenin's mausoleum, built in Red Square, became a pilgrimage site, with the Kremlin's walls forming a dramatic backdrop. During Joseph Stalin's rule, the Kremlin underwent significant changes. Several churches and monasteries were demolished to make way for administrative buildings, though Stalin preserved key structures like the armory for propaganda purposes. The Kremlin served as the nerve center of Soviet governance, housing the Politburo and key ministries. During World War II, it was camouflaged to protect it from German airstrikes, underscoring its strategic importance. Post-war, the Kremlin's Palace of Congresses, built in 1961 under Nikita Khrushchev, hosted Communist Party congresses and cultural events, blending modernist architecture with the fortress's ancient core. The Kremlin in post-Soviet Russia. With the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, the Kremlin transitioned into the seat of the Russian Federation's government. It became the official residence of the president, with the Senate Palace housing the presidential administration. The State Kremlin Palace, formerly the Palace of Congresses, now hosts concerts and state ceremonies. The Kremlin's cathedrals, restored to the Russian Orthodox Church, resumed religious services, symbolizing a return to pre-Soviet traditions. The Kremlin's walls and towers, meticulously maintained, remain a potent symbol of continuity. Its 20 towers, each with distinct designs, include the Spasskaya Tower, whose clock chimes mark Russia's official time. The Tsar Bell and Tsar Cannon, monumental relics of imperial ambition, draw millions of tourists annually. The Kremlin museums, including the Armory and Diamond Fund, showcase treasures like Fabergé eggs and imperial regalia, attracting over 3 million visitors yearly. Political and cultural significance. The Kremlin is more than a physical structure. It is Russia's political and cultural heart. It houses the offices of the president, prime minister, and key ministries, with decisions made within its walls shaping global events. The Grand Kremlin Palace's halls, such as the Georgievsky Hall, host state receptions and award ceremonies, projecting Russia's prestige. The Kremlin's Red Square, flanked by St. Basil's Cathedral and Gum department store, is a stage for military parades, notably the Victory Day celebrations commemorating World War II. Culturally, the Kremlin embodies Russia's historical narrative. Its architecture blends Byzantine, Renaissance, and neoclassical influences, reflecting centuries of adaptation. The Kremlin's role in Russian Orthodoxy, reinforced by Patriarch Kirill's frequent presence, underscores its spiritual weight. State media often frames the Kremlin as a bulwark against external threats, a narrative that resonates with many Russians. The Kremlin in global context. Globally, the Kremlin is synonymous with Russian power. It is a focal point for diplomacy, hosting summits with leaders from China, India, and beyond. The Kremlin's press service, issuing statements on everything from energy deals to military operations, shapes Russia's international image. Its cybersecurity infrastructure, reportedly among the world's most fortified guards against digital threats, reflecting its modern strategic role. The Kremlin's influence extends through soft power. Its museums and cultural events, broadcast globally, promote Russian heritage. The Bolshoi Theater, closely tied to the Kremlin's cultural orbit, showcases Russia's artistic legacy. However, the Kremlin's global image is also contentious, often associated with authoritarianism and geopolitical tensions, particularly since the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the 2022 Ukraine invasion. Challenges and preservation. Maintaining the Kremlin is a monumental task. Its ancient structures require constant restoration, with projects costing millions annually. Climate change poses risks, as rising temperatures threaten the permafrost beneath some buildings. The Kremlin's security, managed by the Federal Guard Service, is airtight, with restricted zones limiting public access to sensitive areas. Tourism, while economically vital, strains the complex. Balancing accessibility with preservation is a priority, with digital tours and virtual exhibits introduced to reduce physical wear. The Kremlin's UNESCO World Heritage status, granted in 1990, underscores its global cultural value, but also imposes strict conservation standards. Transition to Vladimir Putin's leadership. The Kremlin's modern era is inseparable from the figure who has shaped Russia's trajectory for over 2 decades, Vladimir Putin. As the fortress transitioned from Soviet to post-Soviet governance, it became the stage for Putin's rise and consolidation of power. From his office in the Senate Palace, Putin has navigated Russia through economic booms, geopolitical conflicts, and domestic challenges, with the Kremlin's walls bearing witness to his decisions. To understand Putin's Russia, one must first grasp the Kremlin's enduring role as the epicenter of authority, a legacy that frames his leadership and ambitions. This script, designed for a 20-minute video on the Fleeky platform, offers a detailed exploration of the Kremlin's history, architecture, and significance. It seamlessly transitions into a narrative about Vladimir Putin, setting the stage for a combined video that traces the fortress's influence through Russia's past and present.